We had been planning this camping trip for months, a weekend getaway at a secluded lake deep in the Pacific Northwest. It was supposed to be a perfect escape from the pressures of work and city life. There were 5 of us: me, Jake, Megan, Sarah, and Tom. We arrived at the campsite just before sunset, the golden light filtering through the trees, casting long shadows on the ground. We set up our tents, built a fire, and settled in for what we thought would be a relaxing night. The lake was tranquil, its surface reflecting the dusky sky. After dinner, we decided to take a walk along the shore. The air was crisp and cool, and the only sounds were the rustling of leaves and the occasional call of a distant owl. As we strolled, Jake suddenly stopped and pointed towards the water. "Do you see that?" he whispered, his voice tinged with unease. We all turned to look. Something was floating in the water, bobbing up and down. It was hard to make out in the fading light, but it looked like a piece of clothing. Curiosity got the better of us, and we decided to investigate. Tom, the bravest among us, waded into the water and pulled the object to shore. It was a torn, blood-stained shirt. My heart pounded as a sense of dread washed over me. We exchanged worried glances, and Sarah suggested we head back to the campsite. Back at the fire, the mood had shifted. The cheerful banter was gone, replaced by an uneasy silence. As we sat around the fire, trying to shake off the creepy discovery, we heard it, a faint rustling in the woods. We all froze, listening intently. The rustling grew louder, closer, and then we heard footsteps, slow, deliberate, circling our campsite. "Who's there?" Jake called out, his voice shaking. There was no response, just the continued crunch of leaves underfoot. Megan grabbed my arm, her eyes wide with fear. The footsteps stopped abruptly, followed by an eerie silence. Then, without warning, a blood-curdling scream pierced the night, coming from the direction of the lake. Panic set in. We grabbed our flashlights and bolted towards the car, our hearts racing. The scream had come from a distance, but it felt as if it was right behind us. We reached the car, locked the doors, and sat in terrified silence, our breaths heavy and ragged. None of us dared to speak, afraid of what might be lurking outside. We spent the night in the car, too scared to return to the campsite. The forest around us was alive with unsettling noises, twigs snapping, leaves rustling, and the occasional low growl. Sleep was impossible. Every sound made my heart race anew. As the first light of dawn crept over the horizon, we finally mustered the courage to return to our campsite. To our surprise, everything was exactly as we had left it. Our tents were untouched, the fire had burned out, and our belongings were undisturbed. It was as if the horrors of the night before had been a collective nightmare. But then we saw it. The torn shirt we had found in the lake, now draped over a low branch near our tents. It hadn't been there when we fled. Someone or something had placed it there during the night. We packed up quickly, not wanting to spend another moment in that cursed place. As we drove away, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. The serene forest that had initially drawn us in now felt menacing, hiding secrets we were never meant to uncover. After we returned to the campsite, we decided to take a different path to explore the surrounding forest. The tall pines loomed over us, their branches interlocking to form a canopy that blocked out most of the sunlight. We walked in silence, each step crunching on the forest floor, when we stumbled upon an old, abandoned cabin. The wood was rotting and the windows were broken. A chill ran down my spine as I noticed strange symbols carved into the doorframe. "Let's check it out," Tom suggested, but the rest of us hesitated. Inside, the air was musty and the floor creaked under our weight. The cabin was empty, except for an old dusty book lying on a rickety table. Jake picked it up, and as he flipped through the pages, we saw they were filled with handwritten notes in a language none of us recognized. Suddenly, the door slammed shut behind us. We scrambled out of the cabin, our nerves on edge. As night fell again, we gathered around the campfire, trying to shake off the eerie feeling from the cabin. Megan suggested telling ghost stories to lighten the mood, but every snap of a twig made us jump. In the middle of Jake's story, we heard the scream again, this time closer, more desperate. It echoed through the trees, making our blood run cold. "We need to leave now," Sarah urged, her voice trembling. We grabbed our essentials and hurried to the car, but the scream followed us, growing louder with each step. As we fumbled with the keys, trying to get the doors unlocked, we saw shadows moving between the trees. It felt like the forest itself was alive, watching us, waiting for us to make a mistake. Back in the car, we decided to drive to the nearest town. The dirt road was rough, and the headlights only illuminated a small patch of the dense forest ahead. Suddenly, something darted across the road, causing Jake to swerve. We spun out of control and crashed into a tree. Thankfully, no one was seriously injured, but the car was stuck. We had no choice but to continue on foot. The shadows seemed to close in around us as we trekked through the forest. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig made us jump. The feeling of being watched was overwhelming, and I couldn't shake the sensation of eyes on my back. As dawn approached, we stumbled upon an old campsite, long abandoned. The fire pit was cold, and the tents were torn and weathered. In the center of the campsite was a large, flat stone with more of those strange symbols carved into it. Just as we were about to leave, we heard the footsteps again, but this time they were accompanied by a low, guttural growl. We turned to see a figure emerging from the shadows, a tall, gaunt man with wild eyes and a crazed expression. He held a knife, the blade glinting in the early morning light. "Why are you here?" he hissed, his voice raspy and broken. Without thinking, we ran. We sprinted through the forest, our hearts pounding, the man's footsteps echoing behind us. We didn't stop until we reached the main road, where a passing car finally picked us up and drove us to safety. Back in the safety of our homes, the events of that night haunted us. We couldn't shake the feeling that the man was still out there, watching, waiting. The police investigated the area, but found no trace of him or the old campsite. The lake, the cabin, the symbols, they remained a mystery. The bond of friendship that brought us there was now overshadowed by a shared, haunting experience. We never spoke of it again, but the memory lingered, a silent reminder of the terror we faced and the unknown that still lurks in the shadows of the woods. The first call came in on a crisp autumn morning. I was nursing a cup of coffee at my desk when the chief walked in, his face etched with concern. "Turner, we've got another one. Disappearance in the Blackwood Forest," he said, handing me a file. "Another one?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "That's the third this month." "Yeah, and it's getting weirder. Locals are talking about the forest being cursed." I sighed, rubbing my temples. The Blackwood Forest had a reputation, but I didn't buy into ghost stories. Still, there were too many coincidences to ignore. "All right, I'll take a look," I said, grabbing my coat. As I drove to the forest, I couldn't shake the feeling of déjà vu. The last time I dealt with a case like this, it didn't end well. Memories of a similar disappearance 10 years ago, one that still haunted me, resurfaced. But I pushed them aside and focused on the task at hand. At the edge of the forest, I met with Dr. Emily Carter, a forensic psychologist specializing in abnormal behavior and folklore. She had been brought in to help profile the potential suspect or victims. "Detective Turner," she greeted me with a firm handshake. "I've been reviewing the case files. Each victim showed signs of extreme fear and disorientation before they vanished. Any idea what's causing it?" I asked. "Not yet, but there are some disturbing patterns. The disappearances seem to mirror stories from a viral video that's been circulating online. It's a compilation of true horror stories about the Blackwood Forest." I frowned. "You think someone is trying to recreate those stories?" "It's possible. We need to dig deeper," she replied. We were joined by the local sheriff, a grizzled veteran named Hank Lawson. He knew the forest better than anyone and had heard every legend and rumor about it. "Detective Dr. Carter," he nodded. I've been patrolling these woods for 30 years. There's something off about this place. Always has been. Can you tell us more about these legends? Dr. Carter asked. Folks say the forest is haunted, that people disappear because of some ancient curse. But I think there's more to it. Could be someone using those stories to scare people away, or worse. Sheriff Lawson said, his voice low. As we ventured deeper into the forest, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. The trees seemed to close in around us, their branches like skeletal hands. We found signs of disturbances, broken branches, trampled undergrowth, and odd markings on the trees. Then we stumbled upon an old, overgrown trail. Following it, we discovered a hidden underground bunker. The door was ajar, and inside the air was musty and stale. The walls were lined with strange symbols, and we found evidence of recent activity: candles, ropes, and a makeshift altar. This doesn't look good, I muttered. Dr. Carter examined the symbols. These are used in various cult practices. Whoever was here knew what they were doing. We explored further and found a series of journals and recordings. They detailed experiments on fear and mind control conducted by a group calling themselves the Echoes. Their leader, a charismatic figure named Elijah Voss, had a deep knowledge of psychology and folklore. This guy is dangerous, I said. We need to find him. As we combed through the bunker, we heard footsteps above us. Drawing our guns, we cautiously made our way back to the entrance. There stood Elijah Voss, a tall, slender man with piercing eyes and a calm demeanor. Welcome, Detective Turner, Dr. Carter, he said with a chilling smile. I've been expecting you. You need to come with us, Voss, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. He laughed softly. I'm afraid I can't do that. You see, the forest and I have an understanding. It's my playground, my experiment. You're under arrest, I said, stepping forward. But before I could reach him, the ground beneath us shook and the air grew cold. Voss raised his arms and the symbols on the walls began to glow. The forest seemed to come alive, shadows twisting and writhing. You're too late, he said. The echoes have already begun. Fear is a powerful tool, Detective. It can make people see things, believe things, even monsters. The next moments were a blur. Voss disappeared into the darkness, and we were left to fend off the hallucinations that assailed us. Dr. Carter's voice cut through the chaos, grounding me. Turner, focus! It's not real, she shouted. With her help, we managed to fight off the illusions and make our way out of the bunker. The forest was eerily quiet, the malevolent presence gone. But Voss had escaped. We returned to the town, shaken but determined. We had uncovered the truth about the disappearances and the twisted mind behind them. But the case was far from over. In the following weeks, we worked tirelessly to track down Voss and dismantle his cult. The forest was declared off limits, and the townspeople slowly began to heal. But the psychological scars remained. Dr. Carter and I continued to investigate the survivors, studying the long-term effects of their ordeal. The power of fear and suggestion had left deep marks on their minds, blurring the lines between reality and perception. For me, the case was a stark reminder of the dangers of unchecked power and the dark corners of the human psyche. The forest might have been just a place, but the echoes of what happened there would haunt us all for a long time. As for Voss, he remained at large, a shadow lurking on the edge of my mind. I knew our paths would cross again. Until then, I would be ready, always watching, always waiting. The snowstorm hit us faster than expected. My siblings and I were supposed to be spending a quiet winter break at our uncle's remote house, but instead, we found ourselves trapped in a blizzard. It was supposed to be an adventure, a break from our usual routine, but what we encountered was something none of us could have prepared for. Alex, look at this! Sam's voice cut through the howling wind as we trudged through the knee-deep snow. Sam, with his vivid imagination and tendency to believe in the supernatural, had been insisting we explore the woods behind the house. I was the eldest, skeptical and logical, but even I couldn't ignore the curiosity that tugged at me. Lily, our youngest, clung to my hand, her wide eyes scanning the snowy landscape. "What is it, Sam?" I asked, trying to sound more patient than I felt. "Footprints," Sam replied, pointing to a set of tracks leading deeper into the forest. They were unlike anything I'd ever seen, large, misshapen, and far too deep for an animal. We followed the tracks, the snow crunching under our boots. The forest seemed to close in around us, the trees tall and foreboding. Then, through the swirling snow, we saw it, a secluded cabin, half buried under the snow. Who would build a cabin out here? I wondered aloud. "Let's check it out," Sam urged, already heading towards the door. Reluctantly, I followed, keeping Lily close. The cabin door creaked as we pushed it open, revealing a dark, musty interior. The air was thick with a sense of foreboding. As our eyes adjusted to the dim light, we saw a shadowy figure in the corner. It moved slightly, and then we heard it, a low, guttural growl that made my blood run cold. "Run!" I shouted, grabbing Lily and dragging her back out into the snow. Sam was right behind us, his face pale with fear. We didn't stop running until we reached the safety of the house, slamming the door shut behind us. The next morning, the storm had subsided, but the footprints were gone, buried under a fresh layer of snow. When we ventured back into the woods, the cabin had vanished too, as if it had never been there. "Maybe we imagined it," I muttered, but I could see the doubt in my siblings' eyes. Sam was adamant. "We saw it, Alex. It was real." Our uncle tried to calm us down, but I knew something was wrong. Something sinister had happened in those woods. I decided to call the police, and that's how we met Detective Harper. Harper was a seasoned detective with a dark past, someone who had seen more than her share of unexplained cases. She arrived with a calm, confident air, but I could see the flicker of curiosity in her eyes. "Tell me everything," she said, her voice steady and reassuring. We recounted our story, and Harper listened intently. "This isn't the first time something like this has happened," she said, almost to herself. "I've seen cases like this before." Detective Harper began her investigation, combing through the forest with a meticulous eye. She found evidence of disturbances, broken branches, trampled snow, and odd markings on the trees. The more she uncovered, the more uneasy I felt. "There have been disappearances in this area," Harper explained. "People vanishing without a trace. There's a local legend about a creature that inhabits these woods, something capable of altering reality." As the days passed, my siblings began to change. Lily, usually cheerful and innocent, grew quiet and withdrawn. Sam, always imaginative, started having vivid nightmares, waking up screaming about the shadowy figure from the cabin. I felt a growing sense of dread, as if something was closing in on us. Harper stayed with us, trying to piece together the mystery. She uncovered old records, tales of a creature that could manipulate fear, bending reality to its will. The legend spoke of a portal, a gateway to another dimension, hidden deep in the woods. Another blizzard hit, trapping us inside the house. The wind howled outside, and the house seemed to creak and groan under its weight. Strange occurrences began to happen, doors slamming shut, whispers in the dark, and shadows moving on their own. "We need to stay together," Harper said, her voice firm. "Whatever it is, it feeds on our fear." But it was too late. The creature was already inside. The air grew cold, and the shadows seemed to come alive, wrapping around us. Sam and Lily began to act strangely, their eyes vacant, as if they were in a trance. "Stay back!" Harper shouted, drawing her gun. But the creature was relentless, its presence suffocating. In a desperate bid, Harper and I managed to pull Sam and Lily into the living room. The creature manifested fully now, a dark, twisted figure that seemed to shift and change before our eyes. "You can't have them!" Harper yelled, firing a shot. The bullet passed through the creature as if it were made of smoke. The creature lunged at us, and I grabbed a nearby fire poker, swinging it wildly. Harper threw salt and chanted something I couldn't understand. The creature recoiled, its form flickering. In a final, desperate move, Harper shouted, "Get them out of here, Alex!" I grabbed my siblings and ran for the door. The wind and snow whipped around us, but I pushed forward, not daring to look back. As we reached the edge of the forest, there was a blinding flash of light, and the creature's howl echoed through the trees. Then, silence. Days later, the storm cleared, and the forest returned to its eerie tranquility. The cabin was gone, as if it had never existed. Detective Harper had vanished too, leaving only her badge behind. The authorities dismissed our story as hysteria, brought on by the blizzard. But I knew better. The creature was real, and it was still out there, lurking in the shadows. We moved away, trying to forget, but the memories lingered. Sam and Lily slowly returned to their old selves, but I could never shake the feeling of being watched. Years later, I returned to the forest, driven by a need for closure. The trees whispered secrets, and the air was thick with the scent of pine. As I stood at the edge of the woods, I felt a presence, a reminder that some mysteries are better left unsolved. Detective Harper's words echoed in my mind. The forest holds many secrets. Be careful what you seek, Alex. Some doors, once open, can never be closed. With a heavy heart, I turned and walked away, leaving the shadows behind. But the forest and the creature within would forever haunt my dreams.